and welcome to the Inner Woman Wellness podcast. So this week I'm joined by the lovely Rebecca Sairs, and she is a health coach who specialises with women who are suffering from the horrible condition that is PMDD. So we're going to be getting into it today and kind of breaking down what it is, how we can help, and go from there. So welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, it's so great to have you, honestly. Like this has been something that's come onto my radar really only in the past couple of months. It was something that I'd never heard of before and has awful consequences for women. So it's just good to meet someone who deals with women that are going through this on a daily basis to kind of get your thoughts on it, and see how we can get it out there in the wider world, really.
Yeah.
So I guess how I want to kick this off is it would be great to have a little intro and background to you and how you got to where you are and go from there.
Sure. Yeah. So I was diagnosed with PMDD in my late 20s, and that was after about a decade of experiencing mood symptoms out the wazoo, I guess you could say. So starting about my late teens, I started getting anxiety, I started getting depression. I was really tired all the time, it felt like. And I would just cry at the drop of a hat and wouldn't be able to stop crying. So that went on through college, and then after college I was a middle school teacher, so 6th, 7th, 8th grade, preteens and early teens. And during that time, all of those symptoms were just, they would come, they would go, and I would find myself hiding in my closet because I couldn't face life, or I'd go to school and I couldn't stop crying, so I would have to go home, or being really really tired and not being able to get out of bed. And I went to see my doctor and I got put on an SSRI, an antidepressant, and that made me feel like I would wake up in the morning and I would be like, I want to be dead. I don't want to be here anymore. I wasn't suicidal, but it just took everything out of me. I was also on and off birth control a lot. And when I would take birth control, I would kind of feel these symptoms all month long, the anxiety, the depression. They would just my body is nope, meds aren't your friend. For some reason, I don't respond well to them. And so I was on and off a lot of medications. I eventually got off, and then I moved and I got a new doctor, and she's the one who's I think you have PMDD. Let's put you on an SSRI the 2 weeks before your cycle. And that's a common treatment that doctors will do if you have PMDD, because some people with PMDD respond really well to that treatment. So I tried that, got back on birth control. I feel like I'm a slow learner sometimes when it comes to things, but got back on birth control. I had my thyroid levels were all normal, but I had a doctor who was no, they're kind of borderline, so we'll put you on some thyroid medications. And I came to a point where I had so many side effects from my medications. I started twitching, I also went through a phase where I had these really irrational thoughts, and I believe that, I am the ugliest person in the world. I need to go get plastic surgery. I need to not tell anyone in my family or friends that I'm doing this. So I'm going to have to move to another country and start my life over. So I had this period of really irrational thoughts as well. So it was this combo of, the anxiety, the depression, missing work, avoiding friends, avoiding social situations, the fatigue, and then just waking up and being I don't want to be here anymore. So it kind of all came to a head, and I also started twitching, and I was I can't do this anymore. I'm done. No more meds. I got to figure out another way. This isn't helping me. And around that time, I came across Alyssa Vidi's work, and she does a lot with cycle syncing and eating for your cycle. And I don't actually do that now, but it kind of opened my eyes to okay, maybe I can use food and some of these other things to help support me mentally, physically, emotionally. And that kind of started this long journey of finding a doctor. I started working with a functional medicine doctor, started working with a health coach, drastically changed what I was eating. Had a lot of gut health issues because I'd been on so many medications like my whole life. And so I worked on that. I put major boundaries around my work because at that time I was working like 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and I was really stressed about it. So I put major boundaries around that, found some other, got into yoga as a stress relief. And it took a long time, like a couple of years, but I feel like now I'm in a point where, I classify myself as like, I get PMSy.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you call it PMT? Or what do you call
Yeah,
PMS?
PMT, PMS. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I get a little PMSy. Like I still notice some shifts, but like I'm not debilitated by these symptoms anymore. Like I'm able to function. So that eventually led me to getting my health and wellness coaching certification, which I did through the Integrative Women's Health Institute because I really wanted to focus on women's health.
That's what I'm
Continue
doing.
my education with Nicole Jardam and her Fix Your Period apprenticeship, because again, I wanted to dive into that. So that's kind of what led me here to what I do and who I help. So yeah, that's my nutshell version of my
Amazing.
story.
Oh, it's such a journey. I think that's the thing. Like it can just completely derail women on,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just not spoken about. Like as I say, like I only knew about this, you know, about a month ago that it was this bad. And the fact that women are committing suicide, I have
Mm-hmm.
quite a high rate of women that are suicidal over it. Like it just absolutely baffles me. And the women that I've met who are dealing with this, when I talk to them, they're so lovely. Like they have the most amazing life. Like they're so great, and they're like, yeah, I'm like this for 2 weeks, but then the other
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks I don't want to be here at all, and I do have suicidal thoughts. And you're like, it's just so drastic. So
Yeah.
the ins and outs of it, what is PMD and how is it different to PMS? Like what's the difference between it all?
Yeah. So it stands for premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And I'll start with how they're similar. They're similar in that you will experience symptoms in the days before your period. So in that luteal phase, which is about 12 to 14 days before your period, and you'll get physical symptoms like maybe breast tenderness or bloating. You can also get emotional symptoms like anxiety, depression, anger, and rage is a big one. So that's similar to PMS. You can get all those things too. The difference is the severity. So people with PMS, probably they're going to get some symptoms maybe 3 to 5 days before their period, and they might not be fun, but usually they're able to still function. Whereas people with PMDD, they can start getting symptoms like as soon as ovulation hits, and the symptoms are so severe that it, for some of them, it's really hard to keep a job. They ruin relationships. It's just really hard to function. Like you can't get out of bed sometimes. So a lot of people with PMDD will describe it as like, once ovulation hits, or maybe a few days after, I feel like this switch has been flipped and I turn into this totally different person. Whereas PMS, like again, you're going to get those same symptoms, you're going to get them around that same time, but they're not going to be quite as severe. And then another characteristic of both is that once your period starts or within a few days, the symptoms are going to go away.
Amazing. And is it just with PMDD, is there something like out of balance more chemically in the brain, or how it processes kind of your hormones, emotions? Does that come into play more in PMDD? How does it go back to that?
Yeah, so the current thought is that people with PMDD respond abnormally to normal fluctuations of your hormones that happen cyclically. So like normally after ovulation, your progesterone goes up, and progesterone is supposed to be calming and kind of make you feel good. But people with PMDD have an opposite response. Instead of feeling that calm, they're going to feel anxious and they're going to get these mood symptoms. So Yeah, and it's thought with PMS, like it might be an estrogen dominance kind of thing that are making you have all these symptoms, which, I mean, if you have PMDD, you could also have that too, but the cause is thought to be like, no, you're just like abnormally responding to these normal hormones. So.
And just, does this kind of, does it still take a hold during pregnancy, during menopause? Is it in those phases of life? How does it affect women?
Yeah, so when you're pregnant, you shouldn't be experiencing PMDD symptoms. And then menopause, when you're going into menopause, a lot of times PMDD will get worse for many people. So it's interesting because PMDD can show up at any time. Like sometimes it will show up in teenagers, but for a lot of people, it will show up like after they have a baby, or like I mentioned, like it will show up as they're going into perimenopause, or it'll get worse then. So it is interesting in that way because those things can affect it. And it's also like there might be some correlation or connection. Like if you had postpartum depression, you might be more likely to experience PMDD. So, and a lot of this is like, they don't really know a lot about it yet still. Like more research needs to be done, unfortunately. I always say it's like, hey, it's 2020 and they have ideas for what's going on, but they don't know for sure. So
Yeah, I unfortunately I feel that's a really common theme with so much of women's health, is it's
yeah.
kind of we're in this wood and we're kind of, you know, muddling through the trees and kind of trying to figure
Yes.
it out, and normally it's down to us women to figure it out on our own.
Yeah.
And so currently there isn't any, how do you kind of, I guess, diagnosis, how do you get diagnosis, and kind of the meds, is that like a long-term solution that they put you on meds, like how do you live with this basically?
Yeah, so to get the diagnosis, there's no like blood test or anything at the moment. The best way to get a diagnosis is to track your cycle and your symptoms for a couple of cycles. And they break it down into two categories. There's a mood category where you're gonna track symptoms like the anxiety, the depression, the weepiness, the sadness, the anger. And then there's a cognitive behavioral category where you're gonna track like if you're interested or not interested in your usual activities, if you're having a hard time concentrating, changes in appetite. Are you binge eating? Are you nauseous? Are you having intense cravings? Are you sleeping a lot? Do you have insomnia? And so you're going to track those things for a couple of months and bring that information with you to your doctor. And then your doctor's going to look and see, okay, do you have at least one symptom from the mood category? Do you have at least one symptom from the behavioral category? And you have at least 5 symptoms total. And then from there, they're going to look at, okay, do they appear in the days before your period? Do they go away once your period begins or within a couple of days? And then they're also going to look at, do the symptoms, you know, affect your ability to function? And then on top of that, hopefully your doctor will look and run some blood tests, make sure it's not like a hormone imbalance, and look at thyroid, because that has a lot of the same symptoms and can often get misdiagnosed. So they should be running some thyroid tests to rule that out as well. And then if you fit kind of all of those pieces, you would probably get a PMDD diagnosis. And then from there, yeah, your doctor is usually they will prescribe an SSRI first, and that can be helpful for many people with PMDD. And again, like sometimes they'll have you take it all month. For other times, it'll just be that 2 weeks before your period. Other people, they'll prescribe birth control, especially if you're like wanting that contraception too. So that's another common thing. For some people, those things don't work, and like eventually it leads to hysterectomy, and that, you know, I don't know a ton about that. I personally have not done that, but it sounds like it's kind of a mixed bag as far as like, for some people they find it helpful, others they can still experience symptoms, so it's kind of not a perfect solution, I guess. So that's kind of the traditional treatments.
Okay, and I mean, some of the people that I've talked to who are suffering, they are doing, they're doing all the natural ways, they're exploring all the natural ways, and they're getting frustrated with themselves because they're like, I'm still struggling.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a key thing where I feel like there are different ways, and I feel like medicine should combine with like functional medicine and should all come together. But I feel that people are so hard on themselves when they have drugs. But there's like the member's story that I shared on Monday. She had given herself such a hard time that she had tried to take herself off of these pills, and then she was speaking to her boyfriend. He said, you wouldn't take a person suffering with diabetes off of their meds that's keeping them alive. So it's kind of one of those things where it's helping your symptoms, I guess, but like if you're being prescribed drugs, do not take them, because that is such a complicated issue with your brain. And I think it's a really important key message, that there are things that you can definitely do and put into your life to make it easier and more manageable. But when that doctor is telling you you need these drugs to keep you in balance, it's just important that we kind of point that out, is not to not take them, but obviously implementing the strategies that you say. Like, what has been on your journey, and when you have women that come and see you and they just don't know, like they've just had enough, where do you kind of begin? What's your process with them to kind of make them look at their life and things that they can implement?
Yeah. So I want to jump back to the drugs real fast, because I grew up in a home where it was like, yeah, I take medicine. Yeah, I go to therapy. Like, there was no shame around medication at all. So, exactly your point, like, why do people take medication? To feel better. Like, there's no shame in that. Like, there should be no shame in that, at least. Like, but for me, in my experience, like, the side effects were so horrendous. And for some, I know a lot of other people, like, for them, the side effects were so horrendous. So my advice when you're taking drugs is, no shame. Talk with your doctor, learn the pros and cons, because for me, I wasn't told all of the pros and cons. And I'm kind of like angry about that. I'm like, why didn't they tell me this could happen? And then, like, no shame. If it helps you feel better, then that is awesome. That's amazing. But yeah, I work with people more naturally. Like, I'm not a doctor, so I don't like treat or prescribe or diagnose or any of those things. Like, and I make all of my clients work with doctors, because again, like, you need to have that, and a therapist, I say, with this, because I'm also not a therapist, but I think that mental health piece is really important as well. So what I do, though, like, I'm a little different. Like, I think you need those in place, but I come in and whether you're taking medications or you're not, like, I help you get these foundational pieces into place. And these are what Dr. Jolene Brighton calls a mama medicine. It's everything your mama told you to do. So what is she telling you to do? She's telling you, like, get off your phone and go play outside, hang out with the right crowd, eat your vegetables, go to sleep on time, all of these things. So I'm helping people with food a lot of times, because inflammation is thought to be a possible contributor to PMDD. So finding ways to, either work on gut health or any other kind of inflammation, and you can do that through food. And then, like, if you are taking medications, then food can also be really important, because a lot of times they'll deplete some nutrients. And if you're depleted in those nutrients, it can cause similar symptoms to PMDD. So, like, really making sure you have that nutrient dense, anti-inflammatory foods. We also work on sleep, and a lot of times they have trouble with sleep. So optimizing, like, how can we figure out how to, either reduce the fatigue or reduce the insomnia. Movement can be really helpful if you're experiencing, like, depression or anxiety, like those mood symptoms. So helping them get something into place there. And then community, I think, is huge. I think any kind of condition that's this big and devastating, like, we need a community. So I try to help them get that in place. And I call it a support system, and I see it as different, like there's different categories. You need your healthcare team, so you need your doctor, you need your therapist at a bare minimum, but you might want something like an acupuncturist or a health coach or a nutritionist, or there's a variety of things. And then from there, like your friends and family who in your life can support you, maybe like help you cook dinner on your PMDD days, or clean up, or carpool with the kids so you don't have to do that on those days. And then things like paid services, like do you need to get your groceries delivered because you can't leave the house, or things like that. And it's different for everybody, but I think when you're going through something really challenging, you need that wide and deep support system. So I try to help them build that out so they're not doing it alone and they're not feeling like they're alone. So those are kind of the big things. And then another big piece of my work is like all of these things are like good and great, and we already kind of know we should do them, but it's really hard to do them consistently, especially like for normal people, right? For people that don't have PMDD, maybe I shouldn't use the word normal, but for people that don't have the PMDD, but when PMDD comes up, it's like so hard to keep doing these. So I help them come up with ways to kind of keep going and keep working through that. So that's what I do.
Amazing. It's so how do we kind of, I guess, how do we go from here? Because it is something that drastically affects women. Like, as you say, like women commit suicide, they're losing their jobs, like it completely can tear women's lives apart. And how do we raise awareness of it, and how do we get the word out there more, and kind of get these women who are suffering more support on all sides of things? Like, how do we, and that understanding, I guess, because I feel across the board with a lot of women's health issues, especially in the place of work, especially, not being sexist, but if it is a more male dominated office, how do we bring that understanding into the wider world of actually, I'm not just on my period, I'm feeling like I don't want to be here anymore. Like how do we get that awareness out there, and how do we progress from here?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of organizations that are some of their primary goals are to raise awareness. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Vicious Cycle. I think they're based in the UK, and like they are all about raising awareness around PMDD. So if you're interested in joining their cause and helping raise awareness, they have a lot of resources. Another one is IAPMD. They are another organization. They have a lot of information about PMDD, and then they also have things like information for doctors, because this is a common thing. Someone will go to their doctor and their doctor will have never even like heard of PMDD, or maybe they have, but they don't know that much about it. So they have some resources on their website that you can download and you can bring to your doctor, and they're like research-based, like doctor language kind of thing. So, I mean, unfortunately, it's kind of like we have to raise awareness within that space as well. And then, there's, I think just, I don't know if I have a great answer to this other than just like, it's not like, I think we do kind of want to close off, and like if like we feel alone or we feel like we can't talk about it, but as much as you can, like getting support, and then like, not being afraid to talk about your situation. And I know that's hard, that's easier said than done for sure, but I think just, and sometimes I think it's easier to bring this conversation up if you have something to talk about. Like, hey, I just heard this podcast about PMDD, like I'd love for you to listen to this, and like maybe we can talk about this, to kind of help segue and like bring the conversation to the table if you need to talk about it with someone. But yeah, I feel like it's kind of a not a tricky question, but it's hard in a lot of spaces. Like you're right, if it's male dominated, like because they can be dismissive and it feels like unheard. But I would just encourage people to, as much as you feel safe and as much as you're able, like use your voice and speak up about what you're experiencing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like I've said in previous episodes, like I've always had a really negative view of social media, but actually coming into this world and setting up in a women wellness, it's actually an amazing community, and everyone has each other's back. And I think that's super important to remember, that there are people out there who are in a similar boat, and who's, you know, like I don't suffer from it, but my message is always open if people are feeling like it. And it's just knowing that people are out there that if you just need an ear, that they're there for you, and that you're not alone. Because as you say, it's one of those conditions that you just want to shut off from everyone and be on your own. So it's important that people know that it's out there.
And I want to jump in and say IAPMD, they have a peer support group too. So if you are ever feeling just like totally alone or devastated, they have really good support for people. So definitely check that out as a resource.
Amazing. Like our weekly spotlight this week has actually been PMDD and me, and they've got like a similar system. They've got a similar support network, and they do conferences about it and everything like that.
Beautiful.
They're also another one to go and check out. And I'm going to update my website and everything to have all these resources on it, but it's definitely good that people know that there's organisations out there that are trying to move things forward. We hope that as a whole, women's health and all that might catch up to the 21st century. That would be and so what are your top 3 tips for women that just don't know where to turn to? They're not getting answers from their doctors, they're just like at their wits' end with everything. What is your top 3 tips for women that just don't know where to begin and are feeling really overwhelmed?
Well, I would say first, definitely track your cycle and track your symptoms for at least 2 cycles, because then you have solid evidence. When you go to the doctor, you can be like, look, on day 17, my anxiety goes out the roof and it lasts until my period starts, so it's not just like, I get anxious but I don't really know. So that's what I would do first, like get that information, that data, so that when you go to the doctor, you have something to show them. And I have a podcast, and I have a podcast episode all about how to talk to your doctor. I think it's episode 8, but if you go there, it gives you lots of tips for talking to your doctor, because I know that can be like super frustrating and super discouraging. From there, I would really, really encourage you to build out support systems. I know, at least over here, like we all want to be independent women and do things alone, but again, I cannot emphasize this enough, like get support in a Facebook group of people that understand, get support to help you do your basic life tasks. If you're not finding a good doctor, I say fire that doctor, go find another one if possible. I know your healthcare system's a little different over there, but over here it's like you can kind of choose to a point who your doctor is. So that would be a couple of the first things. Another thing I would say is while you're trying to figure out meds or doctors or anything like that, start with one of the basics, because again, we want to reduce inflammation as much as we can. So, and you can do that through food or sleep or stress reduction or movement, really. So choosing one, don't try to do all of them. Choose one thing, get really focused, and then make one teeny tiny action step around that. Like if you want to, so maybe you want to start addressing your food, but it feels overwhelming, then maybe all you do is add in one extra piece of fruit a day or one vegetable a day. So make your action step teeny tiny. And a lot of times people are like, why would I do that? That's not going to help. But the purpose of it is to make it so small that you can sustain it over the long term, and that you can sustain it when PMDD shows up, because that is like really hard to do. So we want to start small and then slowly build up with those behavior changes. So those are the 3 things: track your symptoms, get support, and then start making like those foundational pieces, no matter if you decide meds or not meds, that they're going to help you. So
amazing. And so where can people find you and further information about what you offer? And tell us.
So pretty much everywhere, website, Facebook, Instagram, you can find me at PMDD Health Coach. And I have a podcast called Power Over PMDD if you want to dig deeper into some things that you can do for PMDD. And yeah, I'm most active on Instagram. If you come over, give me a DM, say hello. I'd love to meet you. So yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Honestly, like, thank you so much for sharing some light on it, because it is something that is just, I was horrified when I found out about it. It's good to talk about it and get it out there, and for, I hope it helps someone to know that, like, they listen to this and that they're not alone, there is support out there. And I think that's the key thing of, it's a horrible thing, but it doesn't have to be the end of your life. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can still live with it. So hopefully people take that away from this, and we just got to keep going, us women. We'll get there eventually. We will get them. We'll be listened to eventually, I promise. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It really means so much, and I hope everyone goes and checks you out.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a lovely day, and wish you the best in the rest of the week.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate this conversation, and really, I honestly really appreciate what you're doing for like women as a whole. So that's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.